This 2018 Jeep Cherokee promises rugged Jeep DNA in a small crossover body. But does that mean endless adventure or endless repair? I know Jeep has had a lot of reliability concerns and frustrations over the years. There are things you need to know if you want to get one of these Cherokees and to make sure you don't run this into the ground. There are things that you just can't avoid with these. In this video, you're going to want to stay tuned because we're going to be deep diving into this one. When Jeep released this KL generation in 2014, the first thing I thought was, what's different about it? What makes this Jeep compared to RAV4, Honda CR-V, and the other compact crossovers? I thought that this was just a cool crossover that had the Jeep designs. And yes, depending on the configuration, it is. But there are options that you can get, such as a rear locking differential, which really differentiates this one from the Toyota RAV4, Honda CR-V, and many of the other crossovers in this segment.
I'll be honest, when I first saw these Jeep Cherokees, I thought they were just another crossover with a Jeep badge slapped on. And yes, that can be true depending on the model, but to be fair, Jeep did give this thing some serious credibility, especially with the Trailhawk versions that came with a rear locking diff. This one though, it's a front wheel drive, so while it's not built for crawling up a mountain trail, it still kind of nails the look. So while the front wheel drive models may be best for those who can care less about going off-road, that's still more authentic than half of the lifted trucks that never see anything more than a Costco parking lot. Jeep is the only one that I feel can still pull off their traditional Jeep look in a modern crossover and make everything look just right. I appreciate it. I do think they look cool.
The interior of the Jeep Cherokee is actually extremely well laid out. You have the padded dashboard, the door panels are padded, even the rear is padded, which I appreciate. I like how the vents are lifted. It just gives it a tougher feel. It is a simple interior, but it doesn't feel like they skimp. And you have both of your USB ports, you have two center console storages, you have a smaller one up top and a larger one down below. You have two power outlets here, you have a USB, and then you have an SD card, which I would guess is for your infotainment system. This doesn't have the Uconnect infotainment system, but this one works just fine. The backup camera, however, leaves more to be desired. This backup camera really feels like they just tried to comply with the federal regulations, but I guess I can appreciate that there is one. There is a storage right up top in the dashboard, which is really cool. There's sunglass storage on the top as well, and everything else is kind of standard. The buttons are really nicely placed. Cruise control right on the steering wheel. Your phone buttons, your menu select. Gauges are simple, speedometer, tachometer, and nothing else. I do wish that there was a better place to put your phone. These areas here they're okay. Otherwise, I do like the interior. You know, for 2018, I do think that that should have been something they thought out. The back seat is also very roomy. The seats are so incredibly comfortable back here. I don't know what it is. It just feels like home. You have AC vents back here. You have an armrest and cup holders, and the seats, I think it's the seats. The seats are so incredibly comfortable. The legroom is perfect. It's a great back seat.
With the rear seats folded down, the rear cargo space is 54.9 cubic feet. Nice.
This particular Jeep Cherokee has the Tigershark 2.4 liter MultiAir motor, which we need to have a serious discussion about. From oil consumption problems to long-term reliability concerns, this motor has sparked a lot of debate. We need to break down the common problems with this engine, what was corrected, and if this is an engine that you should trust in the long run. It puts out 184 horsepower at 6,400 RPM and 171 foot-pounds of torque at 4,600 RPM. These were also available with a 3.2 liter Pentastar. Now remember, the Pentastar motor is usually a 3.6, but these had a shorter stroke, which brought it down to 3.2. Less torque, but better fuel economy. Only the Jeep Cherokees had the 3.2 Pentastar.
Before I even get into the pros and the cons, you have to understand what the multi-air system is and how it works, because it plays the biggest role in how long this engine is going to last. Most engines use a throttle body to control airflow. Open the plate, more air, more fuel, more power. Simple. The Tigershark 2.4, not so much. This thing runs Fiat's multi-air system, which is basically an electro-hydraulic middleman between the camshaft and the valves. Here's how it works. The camshaft does not directly push the valves open. Instead, it pushes on a small hydraulic chamber filled with pressurized oil. That oil's motion goes through a solenoid valve, which the engine computer or ECU can open or close in milliseconds. When the solenoid's closed, oil pressure transfers from the camshaft's motion straight to the valve, full lift, just like any other overhead cam engine. But when the solenoids open, the pressure bleeds off and the valve opens less, or not at all. So the camshaft is still spinning, but it's the ECU that decides how much of that motion actually reaches each valve for every single stroke. It's like variable valve timing in independent throttle bodies on steroids. Keep in mind that these engines do also have a throttle body, but it's more of a backup. It's still there and functional, but it's not the main way airflow is controlled under normal conditions. The throttle plate usually stays open, while the multi-air system handles the real control of how much air goes into each cylinder by adjusting the valve lift and timing. Because of that, the engine does not need to create vacuum by choking airflow at the throttle plate. This reduces pumping losses, which improves throttle response and fuel efficiency. I noticed this as I was cruising along at about 40 miles per hour. Just an ever slight touch of the accelerator pedal gave me just the right amount of acceleration. Even if I'm crawling at a very low speed, throttle inputs seemed perfect. If you've ever been in a car where you barely touch the gas pedal and sometimes it feels like an on and off button and you can't just find that right throttle input, this has it. It's perfect actually, thanks to the multi-air system. The Tigershark 2.4 is such an incredible engine with an unfortunate story. Mainly because a lot of the problems that took away from its greatness. This engine has so many strong points that other manufacturers have dropped the ball on. For starters, it has a great short block. Unlike Hyundai Theta 2 engines, which were a major catastrophe, these engines don't ever really spin bearings or crack blocks, even at higher mileage. The rotating assembly is fine. The timing chain setup is very reliable. Unless you fail to maintain it, these don't have problems with timing chain stretch or problems with the tensioners or problems with the guides or anything along the lines of that. If you have timing chain problems, they are big problems that can cause the valves to collide with the pistons and full engine failure. This doesn't have that. There's no major valve train problems with the Tigershark 2.4, unlike the Pentastar 3.2 liter that this engine has, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Even while the multi-air system is very complex, regular oil changes keep the valve timing smooth and the entire hydraulic system clean and healthy. In other words, change your oil on time or before you're required to, and the valve train will stay happy. These engines are port injected, not direct injected, which honestly I sure hope they are. As complicated of a system as the multi-air is, I'm glad that they didn't include direct injection because that would have caused even more problems, especially with a lot of the software having to recalibrate and deal with all the carbon getting stuck on the valves. Though that's kind of something that was expected. You just never know with manufacturers nowadays. I'll give them some kudos on that one, so less problems to deal with when it comes to carbon buildup on the valves. All of the rest of the components, ignition coils and all that, are kind of typical, no different than other manufacturers. The water pump serpentine belt layout and the cooling system are pretty conventional and accessible. They're not over the top difficult to access. The thermostat housings and the sensors and all that are kind of a typical Fiat Chrysler design. They're not really failure free, but they don't have catastrophic problems either. You don't have to tear apart the entire engine to get these things repaired, so another pro. And unlike the Honda 1.5 or Subarus, the 2.4 Tigershark is not widely known for blown head gaskets either, though there was some problems that I'll discuss in a little bit. This just seemed to be the vast minority of cases. There are cases of these engines that I've seen with 300,000 plus miles on them. If you take care of them, they can last a very long time, despite some of the early problems that they've had. As far as the V6 version, which has the 3.2 liter Pentastar motor goes, it is also pretty reliable. I would probably take the Pentastar over the 2.4 because I do like the additional power that it puts out. The 3.2 Pentastar version of this is just a D-stroked 3.6 Pentastar. Everything else is pretty much the same. It's not a different engine, despite what a lot of the social media experts will tell you. It's the same engine, and it has the same problems, such as the oil cooler housing assembly, which is annoying but not catastrophic. And the big problem that a lot of these engines do have is the problems with the rocker arms, the roller follower assembly bearings kind of seizing up and damaging the camshaft. As it does that, it'll send metal through the entire engine, and you guys know the rest of the story with this when it comes to the Pentastar. There are millions of this engine built. It is used in everything from the Dodge Caravan to the Jeep Cherokees to the Jeep Wrangler to the Jeep Grand Cherokee to, I mean, you name it. There's so many vehicles that use this engine, and so there were a good number of them that developed that problem, and it's super expensive to fix it. That's a major problem. If you don't deal with it, you're going to be replacing an engine. Outside of those two problems, the Pentastar is is actually an incredible motor.
Though this particular Jeep Cherokee does not have the Pentastar motor, it has the 2.4, so we'll be focusing primarily on that motor.
But believe it or not, the 2.4 Tigershark is a motor that can actually last 300,000 plus miles with close care.
But for all of the positive remarks that I have giveth, I shall take it some away, starting with the multi-air system.
Yes, this is the system that makes the vehicle great, and it is the one that also causes tons of problems. But as you would expect, and as I've explained how the system functions, it's also very easy to understand why this system can cause lots of drivability issues, especially related to software and how the ECU controls the valve openings, because if it's not timed right or something is off, then guess what? The engine is probably not even going to run.
The 2.4 liter Tigershark motor got a lot of heat for random stalling. The problem came from the multi-air system itself. When that system isn't happy, maybe the oil is dirty, too thick, or the oil pressure drops, the valve timing and lift can go out of sync just enough to stall the engine. Combine that with software that was never perfectly tuned for low speed transitions, and you get the classic "I came to a stop and the car stalled" problem that lots of Cherokee owners understandably rant about online. Fortunately, there was a software update for that issue. Another unrelated cause of stalling was the voltage regulator, which in normal vehicles is inside the alternator. In the KL Cherokee, they had to get fancy and put it inside of the PCM, or the main vehicle computer, and what do you know, it was also a failure point, which required an entire computer replacement and reprogramming. If the PCM was not properly controlling charging voltage, this meant sudden dips in the system voltage, which can confuse sensors, and the multi-air system, which can once again cause stalling. Oh, I can feel the comment section boiling right now. But wait, there's more. The oil pump housings were known to crack, resulting in oil leaking, a significant drop in oil pressure, and even a potentially failed oil pump, which, you guessed it, can also cause the engine to stall. Though this sounds much more dramatic than it actually is, there was actually a recall for the oil pump housing crack problem, and only about 357 vehicles, more or less, built between September 9th, 2017 through September 28th, 17 were affected in that recall, so you want to look into that to make sure you get that squared away. There were also known common problems with the cooling system and coolant leaking from the plastic thermostat housing. The oil cooler was also known to leak coolant, which owners can get quoted over $1,000 to fix. So yes, very frustrating, but it is a DIY-able job. Just make sure to take your time to bleed the cooling system well. The water pumps can also need early replacement, but this isn't too specific to Jeep. I see this often with the Toyota Lexus 2GR motor, so I won't knock Jeep too hard for this water pump replacement interval and some early failures. The 2.4 liter Tigershark motor is also notorious for burning oil, and it's not all from neglect. The problem starts with the oil control rings on the pistons. Over time, the rings can lose their ability to scrape excess oil off the cylinder walls, leaving oil in the combustion chamber where it gets burned away. What makes this worse is the interactive deceleration fuel system shutoff, or the IDFSO system. It was designed to save fuel by cutting the fuel injectors off during deceleration, something that pretty much all modern cars do. However, the way the multi-air system is programmed can cause a low pressure condition inside the cylinders that can actually pull oil past those already weak oil control rings, making the consumption problem even worse. And if the oil level drops below about 2.5 quarts, the multi-air system can lose its hydraulic control, causing rough running and, you guessed it again, a stall. FCA eventually addressed this through customer satisfaction notifications W20, W84, and W80 with a software update that modified the IDFSO function to reduce those vacuum events during deceleration. In some of the really bad cases, they even replaced the entire long blocks. As far as the suspension goes, there aren't any major catastrophes, but there seems to be a common complaint with the front lower control arm bushings weakening early, around 50 to 80,000 miles or so, and the rear trailing arm and lateral link bushings causing some clunks not too long after, maybe closer to 100,000 miles. There were some TSBs as well for some specific models for the front control arms, but the rest of the suspension just seems to be normal wear and tear. The all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive models, depending on how you would like to call it, it depends on the options because they don't all behave the same, have a known failure
failure point with the PTU, or the power transfer unit. This is essentially a fancier front differential with all of the electronics built in. There are known failures with the PTU or power transfer unit in the all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive Cherokees that can trigger a service four-wheel drive light. But in most cases, it's not the actual gears that fail, it's the actuator. The problem usually comes from oil leaking into the shift motor, which is inside the actuator, or from metal debris building up on the position sensor so it can't tell what gear it's in. If it's just debris, the sensor can usually be cleaned and reused, but if oil made its way into the actuator's shift motor, the entire actuator will need to be replaced, which is quite the involved job. There were also multiple technical service bulletins and recalls related to the power transfer unit that you'll want to look into. Power transfer or PTU issues aren't universal, but they're common enough to spark debate within the Cherokee communities, and they're known to be a weak spot, especially on early all-wheel drive versions. Most of the failures seem to happen between 60 and 100,000 miles, and in most cases it's the actuator that fails, not the gears inside. The transmission is the 9-speed automatic 948 TE built by the German company ZF Friedrichshafen. It's also known as the ZF 9HP48, which was used in many other vehicles with different configurations and different programming. This transmission is not limited to the Jeep Cherokee KL generation. It was used in the Jeep Renegade, the Chrysler 200, the Chrysler Pacifica, the Dodge Dart, the Jeep Compass, the Ram ProMaster City, and it was even used in other brands like Honda Acura or Land Rover and Jaguar. There were different configurations and different programming for these transmissions, but it's not limited to Jeep. So as much as people want to give Jeep all of the hate for the clunkiness of this transmission, you got to know that this transmission was used across lots of different brands. This transmission is very reliable. Early versions of these transmissions had lots of drivability problems in the Jeep Cherokees. There were lots of reports of rough second to third shifts, rough fourth to fifth shifting, hesitation, and gear hunting. There were software updates that seemed to fix a lot of these issues by 2018, though it never seemed to make them perfect. This transmission uses dog clutches instead of the usual bands. The downside is that these type of clutches require extremely precise control, and when calibration isn't perfect, you get some hesitation, jerky shifts, and gear hunting complaints that Cherokee owners talk about. Aside from that, these transmissions don't really leave owners stranded, they just frustrate the owner. These last a very long time, and they are very cheap, which is an indication that there is a low demand for people having to replace these transmissions. As far as paint and exterior goes, black, red, and dark blue Cherokees seem to be some of the worst offenders, with clear coat peeling a little earlier than expected, causing some frustration. The lighter colors seem to hold up better than the darker colors. Though it is normal for darker colors to fade, some of the peeling seem to be earlier than usual. I guess this can fall under body as well, but some owners reported air conditioning condensers leaking and having to be replaced. The interior isn't too bad, aside from Jeep owners universally hating Uconnect's glitches and random freezes. Seriously, that system can test anybody's patience. Overall, the cabin held up quite well. Besides typical wear around the buttons and touch surfaces, the only big problem was the dashboard from the Overland trim. Those got the leather-wrapped dashboard, and over time, that leather started peeling and bubbling, which became a huge frustration point for a lot of owners. The very last thing that I really do not like that FCA, now known as Stellantis, does is the SGW module, which stands for Secure Gateway. Starting in 2018, many of these vehicles, including the Cherokee, got an SGW module. This basically blocks you from accessing bi-directional scan functions as a consumer. So you can read a check engine light, you cannot issue commands unless you subscribe to their annual service and pay their fee and use a compatible scan tool. For those that are unaware, bi-directional scan tools are far more than just a regular engine light code reader. They are called bi-directional scan tools because they can read commands coming from the vehicle computer and also issue commands going to the vehicle computer. It gives you access to do almost anything that the vehicle computer can do, such as turning the fuel injectors on and off while the engine is running for diagnostics, or even things like rolling the windows up and down or turning the headlights on and off from your scan tool to diagnose a problem. In any other vehicle, you can just plug it in and get to diagnosing. In these, you cannot do that without the subscription. There are are bypass methods, but I would reconsider using the bypass method if your vehicle is under warranty. Outside of warranty, then sure, you can probably look into it, but this is something that I just really don't like about new cars in general. Real quick, if you're enjoying the content, make sure to like and subscribe, and I also have some bi-directional scan tools in the description as well. I get a small commission from those, so if you want to support the channel, hey, I really appreciate it.
Okay, driving the Jeep Cherokee. This is a 2018 model year. I hear a rear rattle. That's the rear rattle. I don't know if you can hear it. Kind of. If you own the car and you hear that for an hour-long commute or even longer, I can imagine that getting annoying. I just like the ride, actually. I don't know what it is with this. It's not too firm. It's not too stiff. A little bit of throttle input gets it moving. I'm not really putting my foot into it at all. A lot of people have reported that the 2.4 Tigershark motor just feels underpowered. I love to drive the 3.2 liter Pentastar motor because this feels good to me. I can imagine how much power the thing has. This would completely transform it from a typical smaller or mid-sized crossover to kind of a very capable vehicle, especially with the rear locking diff that these were available with. You don't get that in any other crossover, honestly, and that actually is what differentiates Jeep from the other crossovers. For a moment, I used to think to myself, what makes these things different than other crossovers? I don't know, but the locking differential does. The ride is perfect, but with that being said, it's not that exciting. I don't think I can ask for more, though. This is exactly how I would have it ride, or how I would tune it if I were trying to build the vehicle.
And so that wraps up the Jeep Cherokee. This one's gonna be short. This video had a lot of information and I really hope to help somebody out, but the engine's gonna get a 4.5. Some people may even feel that's too high, but the reality is with this engine, you have to maintain it. They can last a long time, but this is probably the pickiest engine of all time when it comes to oil changes. No joke. You hear this, some people may feel it's a gimmick, but with this engine, it's not. If you're late on oil changes or you kind of get lax from time to time and you forget, I'm just gonna be upfront. This is not the vehicle for you. There's a lot of knickknacks that you got to deal with, from the PCM problems to the stalling problems, a lot of things that you have to get up to speed before you get it going, and so it all plays a factor in it. It can last a long time, but you always got to make sure to check the oil, top it off if it's using some oil, so there's a lot going on here. The transmission, they don't have outright failures. They just don't blow up like a lot of other transmissions do. They last, they're just quirky and they're frustrating to deal with from time to time. Just change the fluid, stay on top of the maintenance, and it should last. The suspension, I'm giving it a 6.5. It's not bad. The control arm wear that some people talk about isn't the worst thing in the world, but I'm also, just like the Buick Encore, kind of factoring in the PTU unit here. It's drivetrain. I should just create another category. I'm not going to knock the suspension category too hard, but the PTU had some problems, and I'm putting in the suspension / drivetrain category, and I'm knocking it down a little bit. It's going to get a 6.5. The PTU problems existed. They weren't rampant, but they existed. And it also was a pain point for some owners. It was pricey and it took a lot of work to get repaired. And so you can't ignore it. You got to deal with it. So I'm giving it a 6.5, but just keep that in mind with the PTU. Repair costs. Get a 5.5. The transmission is dirt cheap. That's the super kudos. The engine is between $1,000 and maybe $2,300. The engines fail and people have to deal with them from time to time. And there are also a bunch of other stuff that you got to deal with. There's electrical problems with the PCM, and there's also the factor of really stay on top of oil changes and doing it more often. It's going to cost you more. It's just part of it. The fact that some of the problems that these vehicles have are software related can also make you chase your tail. And if you're taking it to a shop, it can cost you some money too. I'm going to factor this stuff in. This is a pain point as well for Jeep owners. This is where that term, it's always in the shop, comes from, because they're trying to chase these problems, and a lot of them are software related and electronic related, and it's hard to diagnose that stuff, especially when the problems are intermittent and they only happen sometimes. That's going to take a hit on repair costs. I'm giving it a 5.5. The interior is going to get a 6. It's actually not bad. The Overland model is going to knock this one down thanks to the beautifully wrapped dashboard that bubbles and peels and comes all apart. The rest of the models seem to be just kind of standard, so not the worst. There's interior rattles, but most cars seem to have knickknacks and problems like that. But the Overland model is really going to make the biggest impact to this score here, 6.0. Body and paint is a 7. I'm being very nice here. I know some of the darker colors seem to wear and peel earlier, but this isn't the worst that I've seen. I've seen other manufacturers with much bigger problems than this. And yes, you know, having to repaint the vehicle is uber expensive. I get it. This isn't unique to just Jeep or American manufacturers. And so
The 7 is, I think, a fair score in this segment. It's not perfect. There are some problems. The lighter colors seem to be okay, but while it's not perfect, it isn't the worst I've seen. So I'm giving it a 7. This needs a lot of attention to keep going for a long time. There are very high mileage models. I think there's a 400,000 mile version out there, but the only way you're gonna really get there is with obsessive maintenance. Hey, if you liked the video, make sure to like and subscribe. And if you have a car in the Sacramento area that you want on the channel, make sure to reach out. I'm gonna leave my email in the description. There will be more videos coming soon. Until then, I'll see you next time.